I'm Ron Elfenbein. I'm an emergency room doctor. Just imagine one day waking up and finding yourself on the receiving end of a federal indictment. That was the nightmare that I lived for the last 3 years, and I'm still living. I feel like I'm wearing a tin hat when I talk about this. I really do, but it's just been devastating to my life and to my family's life. I'm an emergency room doctor, and during COVID, I became very active, and I opened up an urgent care center before COVID, and then during COVID, we became active in terms of testing, and then once the monoclonal antibodies became available, we became the de facto treatment site, basically, for the state of Maryland, where I live. And we were bigger than Johns Hopkins, bigger than University of Maryland. We were like the largest site in the state, doing 200 to 300 infusions a week, which basically represented the cure for COVID. And this was in direct opposition essentially to the media narrative and the administration's narrative of everybody needs a vaccination. So we were happily infusing people and saving people's lives, and it was really a wonderful thing to be a part of. So much so actually that I was awarded by our governor and our state legislature a personal citation, and the State Medical Society named me its Person of the Year for all the work that I did. Well, the Biden administration decided in its capacity to shut the program down based on spurious data and misreading of that spurious data. And I went on Fox News and I called them out and I said they're going to kill people. And turns out I was right, because 2 weeks later they said, oh yeah, we did misread the data by a factor of 50%. Instead of 70% prevalence of the Omicron variant, it was only 20%. So they got that data wrong, and they were totally wrong in shutting the program down. Well, I found myself indicted on federal healthcare fraud charges out of the blue. No one had called me, no one had emailed me, no one had asked for any records, nothing. They just decided to just swing the hammer and indict me and destroy my life and destroy my family's life as well. So I didn't do anything wrong, so we took it to trial. And every theory that the government had was completely eviscerated by fact and by my attorneys, and mostly importantly by facts. They never looked at the documentation. They never interviewed any of my partners or the people that I worked with. They got my name wrong on the indictment, and the things that they charged me with, their own expert witness testified directly against what they said. They said that we weren't spending enough time with patients. Their own expert said time doesn't matter. They said that it wasn't medically necessary for us to have a provider see the patients when they were getting tested. Their own expert at trial testified it was medically necessary, in direct opposition to what they said in the indictment. So they basically indicted me with no evidence and no proof. They got my name wrong. They never subpoenaed my work emails. They subpoenaed my personal emails, but they never even looked at my work emails. Clearly they targeted me because I spoke against them and because I went on national news and said bad things about the Biden administration. So anyway, went to trial, and every one of their theories was shot down by their own experts and by my attorneys and by the facts. The last thing that they decided on, because they had gotten everything wrong, the government gets the last say. So at closing, the government attorney says, you know, you might be asking yourself, jurors, what the right level of coding was. But the good news is you don't have to know. You just have to know that Dr. Elfenbein is wrong and he's a criminal. And then they said, use your common sense. So unfortunately, they get the last word, but my response to that would have been, there is no common sense. That's like, have you ever filed a tax return? There's no common sense in any of that. The government set the rules up, I followed the rules, and then they're saying, well, you shouldn't have followed the rules, you should have used your common sense. So unfortunately, the jury bought it and they convicted me, but the judge, having sat through the entire case, who was the chief judge of Maryland, threw the whole case out and acquitted me. And not only did he acquit me, but he also said, in the case that the government decides to appeal this case, you will have a new trial. So he did both, which is unheard of for a judge to do. Here's a couple of quotes that I found pretty intriguing. The court, having closely observed the testimony and parsed the evidence in this case, concludes that the evidence weighs so heavily against the verdict that it would be unjust to enter judgment, end quote. Quote, there can of course be no crimes if the defendant complied with those rules, end quote, the defendant being myself. So the judge clearly understood. He wrote a 93-page opinion, which again is unheard of in federal law, that the judge would take away a jury verdict and write such a lengthy opinion. And 2 weeks before the Trump administration was brought into office, the Biden administration appealed the case. And in a very head-scratching decision, the Fourth Circuit overturned my acquittal, but they still offered me a new trial. So now I'm facing the prospect of a new trial in August. So these people, they hope to bankrupt you. They hope to destroy your life, destroy your family's lives. They hope you to get you to plea. That's their goal. They want you to plea. And if you won't plea, you go to trial. They find any way to lie, cheat, and steal to convict you. It's horrible, it's awful, and it's complete weaponization of the Justice Department, and I am a victim of that. So I am facing a new trial in August, and I'm trying as hard as I can to get somebody to hear my story and make this go away, because it's unjust, it's unfair, and it should go away. Thank you.